I'm not sure. I kind of think kind of remains to be seen how these next couple weeks go, but I don't necessarily see them being like crazy buyers, but I also don't see them being crazy sellers either at the same time. I think they'll trade the guys that make the most sense, but I think the interesting ones will be obviously those 1 year deals. Maybe they can get some return, but I think the kind of the more interesting ones are like the Lane Thomases of the world, where he has a year left
Mm.
before arbitration. Same with Kyle Finnegan and Hunter Harvey, who are relievers. And what's that market like around the trade deadline? Are there going to be? I think outfield's a position that a lot of teams need. And so, like, is there some offer for Lane Thomas that they can't refuse? Mike
Sure.
Rizzo last week said that he wanted a all-star caliber return for Lane Thomas, which like he warranted given how he played. But like, does he view them the same way? And does he think that this offer that he gets for Lane Thomas is just too good to pass up? We'll kind of see how it all plays out.
Welcome into another edition of On the Record. As always, my name is Jesse Friedman, and today we're joined by Andrew Golden of the Washington Post to preview this series between the Diamondbacks and the Washington Nationals this week. Andrew, thanks for hopping on. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Excited to talk about the series.
So the Nats, Andrew, are 35 and 36 coming into this three-game set with the Diamondbacks. They, of course, won 71 games last year. It sort of feels to me like they've taken a pretty significant step in the right direction. Do you think that's fair to say at this point in the year?
Yeah, definitely fair to say at this point. I think obviously their starting pitching has kind of been what stood out for them. I think they've gotten a lot of contributions from young guys. Mackenzie Gore, who we all kind of thought would take a step forward, but he has. And then Jake Irvin, who maybe we thought would take a step forward, maybe not this big of a step forward. And then Mitchell Parker's a rookie who didn't even make the team on opening day. You have DJ Hurst, who got called up 3 starts ago and just struck out 13 against the Marlins. So you're getting some contributions from some young pitchers who maybe you didn't expect to. Even Josiah Gray, he only made 2 starts, has been on the ILs. Even in spite of all of that, they've still been really effective. So Trevor Williams was pitching like an all-star until he got injured. So I think their starting pitching has been the key to their success, and they've been getting just enough offense recently to kind of get some momentum and get some wins going.
You mentioned the starting pitching. Yeah, the Diamondbacks, it appears, kind of have their hands full a bit in this series. They have both Jake Irvin on the mound today against Slade Cecconi. And then on Wednesday, we have Patrick Corbin against Brandon Pfaadt. Corbin's situation is certainly a little different. We'll get to him here in a second. But then Mackenzie Gore, who's had a really great year, as you mentioned, against Ryan Nelson on Thursday. Tell me about Jake Irvin, Andrew. It seems like he's really taken a step forward this year, a 3.00 ERA, and looking at some of the peripherals and whatnot, it looks like this is a pretty legitimate breakout season for him.
Yeah, I think the key for him, obviously, he has fastball and his curveball, and those were both his main 2 pitches last year. But I think the key is his curveball. He's been able to keep it in the zone more this year, which is something that he wasn't able to do last year. And so now he's getting the chase because he's establishing it in the zone first, whereas last year maybe he wasn't getting as much chase because he wasn't getting the ball, wasn't keeping the ball in the zone to start first. And so I think that's kind of where you're seeing the breakout for him. He keeps just talking about attacking the strike zone, and I know it sounds very simple, and I know a lot has been made about the Mike Rizzo, like, I don't care how fast you throw a ball forward signs that were around the spring training. It was kind of like a big joke at the time, but honestly, maybe it's working, and maybe that's the key. But for Jake, it's just been keeping the ball in the strike zone, but specifically his curveball, he's throwing it a lot more this year, and it's been really effective. So I think that's the key for him.
Patrick Corbin, certainly someone that Diamondbacks fans are interested in. He had an outstanding 2018 season in Arizona. He signs a 6-year, $140 million deal with the Nats, and he has one great year. The Nats win the World Series. Everything looks fantastic. And then the last several years since then, not so much. My first question about Corbin is, are you surprised that the Nats haven't just moved on from him at this point?
I would say yes and no. Like I think obviously when somebody's pitching this poorly, like obviously like it would just make sense to let go of him, right? But I also think that he is a really good clubhouse guy, which I think it does mean something in the grand scheme of things. They do need a leader who's been there, done that before. The other thing I will say is that like up until this year, there weren't a ton of guys who was blocking. Like it'd be one thing if like there were like 3 guys in AAA who were pitching really well and like you're keeping this guy for no reason, but like he wasn't really blocking anybody per se, and like he was giving you the 6th inning. He just hasn't really been effective. I mean, I think there's obviously an obvious argument just to like get rid of him because he's not pitching well, but it's not like there was anybody who was knocking down the door to take his place. Now there are, though, and obviously you have these guys in the rotation right now, and you have Josiah Gray coming back soon, and you have Kate Cavalli, who was their top prospect for a while, coming back soon too. So when that happens, like I think it would be really shocking if Patrick Corbin did not get either moved to the bullpen or DFA. I think it would be really shocking, honestly disappointing. I think from obviously, I'm sure from a fan perspective, they didn't do that to him. And I think obviously he's been great, but I think now they have the pieces in place where like you don't need to have him pitching every fifth day just to eat innings. Like you have guys who can legitimately compete now, so I think they had to do that.
Yeah, I believe he's led the National League in losses the past 3 years in a row, making $35.4 million this season, something like that. Not an ideal not an ideal situation. I think part of me though is kind of confused. Seeing Corbin in 2018 and how incredible he was with the Diamondbacks compared to now. I mean, the first thing I look at is velocity, and doing a quick search there. Looks like his sinker velo in 2018 was 90.8 miles an hour on average, and this year it's 91.4. It's like actually gone up, if anything, over the last 5 or 6 years. How do you explain the significant downturn for Corbin over the last few seasons?
I think obviously when he was with the Diamondbacks and obviously early on with the Nationals, the key was his slider and getting all the swing and miss of the slider.
Right.
And that was his chase pitch, that was his whiff pitch, and he's not getting the chases and the whiffs that he was early on in the career. So I think I think that's kind of part of the reason for his decline. It's not that I don't think as much velocity as it is that he's just not really getting the misses that he used to get. He's not getting the chases that he used to get. He's not missing bats, and so he's not missing bats. Obviously, I think there's more opportunity for guys to put the ball in play. I mean, obviously more opportunities for him to get hits and slug and all those different things. But I think that's the key for him. It's just he hasn't really been able to get that chase the way he used to in prior years when he was really at his best. And so I think that that's kind of what you're seeing right now. And Davey tries to simplify it too. Davey Martinez is about like he just needs to keep the ball down in the zone. But I do think it's a little bit more than that. I think he's even talked about. I want to say it was in 2022. He sat down with one of my coworkers and he kind of was talking about how maybe he tried to change things in the pandemic with a shortened season and that sort of, and maybe that had an effect too. And so whatever it is, like he just hasn't been able to figure it out since that 2019 season.
Switching gears over to the offense, it sort of looks to me like the Nats maybe don't have any great hitters, but they have a few good ones. C.J. Abrams, Lane Thomas seems to be a fairly consistent, solid hitter. I know Jesse Winker has had a pretty good year for the Nats as well. What does this team look like on the offensive side of the ball?
Yeah, I think the offense is obviously led by C.J. Abrams. When C.J. Abrams is at his best, the team is at their best, and when he's struggling, when the team is struggling, I think that's kind of the general consensus. And I think it was in April he looked like he was going to be an all-stars, hitting like the 300s and the OPS almost at 1,000. And it was like, oh my gosh, like he's breaking out. And then he had really cooled off in May and hit about 200. Just didn't look like the same guy. And now you see him starting to kind of get back into that rhythm. They didn't have Lane Thomas for a month, and so I know he got to a slow start too, but he could have, in theory, been an all-star last year, just stats-wise, at least in the first half. So I think they really missed him, and now that he's back in the lineup, that gives CJ more protection. That gives protection to guys behind him, too, in the order. And so I think those two guys, like you said, Jesse Winker, I think the thing with their veterans, they have a handful of veterans who are, one-year signings who are, probably likely could, I guess at the beginning of the year, I would have said they would have been trade candidates. Maybe now, not so much. Who knows where the Nationals are at right now with that. But I think a lot of their veterans, they signed to these deals, but like they haven't really hit it at the same time. Like you've had Winker start off really hot and then kind of cooled off, and that's when Eddie Rosario got hot, and then he kind of cooled off. And Nick Senzel's had random spurts here and there, and then Joey Gallo strikes out a lot. He's been injured too, so like that one's kind of just he's kind of been on and off for a while. But I think they haven't really had consistent production at the same time. In the last week or so, I think you're starting to see some of it come together at the same time. And so if they can continue that, I think they can have an opportunity to make some noise later on in the season.
You mentioned players they could potentially trade. I mean, yeah, 35 and 36 doesn't look fantastic, but given the state of the National League right now, if you're 35 and 36, you're basically tied for the third wild card spot. Do you see the Nats as potential buyers at the trade deadline? It seems like they certainly have a shot here.
Yeah, I think I'm not sure if I see them as huge buyers per se. Like, I don't think they're going to go crazy trying to buy, but I do think like it's interesting because the positions that they could trade when you look at you look at somebody like a Eddie Rosario or a Jesse Winker, they could trade them in theory, and then you could call up James Wood, who's like one of the top prospects in baseball and could fill in pretty easily. I don't think their production would drop off per se. Obviously, there's a chance it doesn't work out or like he's not as effective, but I think you could make an argument that they could trade those guys away and still be just as good. And you can make the same case with if they trade Trevor Williams, who I know is injured right now, but they obviously have enough in the rotation to sustain them. And so I'm not sure. I kind of think remains to be seen how these next couple of weeks go, but I don't necessarily see them being like crazy buyers, but I also don't see them being crazy sellers either at the same time. I think they'll trade the guys that make the most sense, but I think the interesting ones will be obviously those 1 year deals. Maybe they can get some return, but I think the kind of the more interesting ones are like the Lane Thomases of the world, where he has a year left
Mm.
before arbitration. Same with Kyle Finnegan and Hunter Harvey, who are relievers. And what's that market like around the trade deadline? Are there going to be? I think outfield's a position that a lot of teams need. And so, like, is there some offer for Lane Thomas that they can't refuse? Mike
Sure.
Rizzo last year said that he wanted a all-star caliber return for Lane Thomas, which like he warranted given how he played. But like, does he view them the same way, and does he think that this offer that he gets for Lane Thomas is just too good to pass up? We'll kind of see how it all plays out.
I was thinking the other day about the Juan Soto trade, which is, of course, the Nats took maybe some flack for that in the moment when they traded Juan Soto to the Padres back in the day. But looking back at that deal, I mean, you got C.J. Abrams, you got Mackenzie Gore, you got James Wood, who you just mentioned, arguably the top overall prospect in baseball right now. I mean, the Nationals, I don't know if fleece is the right word, but it seems like they did pretty well for themselves in that deal.
I think it was a reality of just being realistic about the state of where the team was at the time, and I think that obviously Juan Soto's a generational player. You never want to trade a generational player at the middle of his prime, obviously. But I think the reality was like there wasn't a guarantee he was going to re-sign with the team. I think the reality was like they knew their farm system was not the best. They needed to replenish it, and so that was the way of doing it. And so I think it obviously was tough to do at the time. When you look back at it, like it really was a smart trade to kind of restart and like bolster your system. It's really easy to have one great player, but if you have like 4 or 5 really good players you can plug in and fill some spots, that helps you rebuild, get there quicker. And obviously James Wood, we don't know what James Wood will be, but I think he has the potential to be that star player. And so if you have that star player, you have Mackenzie Gore, who could be at the top of the rotation. You have C.J. Abrams, who's a pretty solid shortstop. That's a pretty good haul that they got in return. I know obviously Robert Hassel still has a little bit of ways to go, and Harlan
Right.
Suzanne is low A, so that's not every guy's going to pan out in those trades. But to get 3 quality pieces is obviously a big deal for them.
Last thing for you, Andrew. I mean, it seems, as I said earlier, like this has been a pretty big step in the right direction for the Nationals. I mean, what do you think has to happen? Maybe if it's not this year, but what do you think has to happen over these next few years for the Nats to kind of take that next step and maybe be one of the better young, kind of perennial contending teams in the league?
I think what has to happen, I think it all depends on ownership and what happens in the next couple of years. Obviously, the Nationals were for sale starting in 2022. And then this year they decided they're not selling the team anymore. And so I think I'm interested to see what is the commitment level from the ownership group to bring guys in. Like, are they really all in committed to being the owners, or are they still thinking about potentially selling the team? Like where are their heads at, and how much are they willing to spend in the offseason? I think they have a lot of good pieces, but they do need some upgrades, right? And they don't hit for a ton of power, and so it'd be great to have a couple more power bats at first, third, even catcher in theory, because Keibert Ruiz hasn't really been a great defensive catcher. So I think if you could upgrade
Sure.
and get some more power there, that'd be really good. And I think you could always use arms in the rotation. I know how good the rotation's been, but you just never know from year to year how it's going to go. And so I think in order for them to kind of compete, they just need to sign some guys offensively. I think it helped. I think their biggest need is offensively, just getting some more power. And so I think this offseason, if they were able to do that, I still think they should sign a pitcher if they can. But I think for me, offense is the most important thing for them right now. Just first, third, catcher, even an outfielder who can just hit for some more power. So. And that can be coming from the minor leagues too. And so James Wood and Dylan Cruz end up being what you think they're going to be, which I think they will be. Then I think you're getting a really great team. They just kind of need to fill in a couple more places.
Well, D-backs Nationals over these next few days. It'll be interesting to see how it goes. Andrew, thanks again for hopping on. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.